Uh, our plenary talk of today is Hortensia Soto. Hortensia was born in Belén del Refugio, Jalisco, Mexico, and raised in a farm in western Nebraska. Now, Hortensia has published in various areas of mathematical education, including assessment, mathematical preparation of elementary teachers, outreach efforts for high school girls, and especially in the area of teaching and learning of undergraduate mathematics. Hortensia has mentored young women and promoted mathematics via summer outreach programs. She has also been involved in facilitating professional development for K-16, I was going to say K-12, but no, teachers in Nebraska, Colorado, and California. Currently, she's delivering professional development to collegiate teachers as part of Project Promesas SSC. I can put that on the chat in case you are interested in that, or you can also look at that on the bio. And Hortensia is a working member of the Mathematical Association of America and currently serves as the Associate Secretary and is an editor of a MAA, Instructional Practices Guide. And so, Hortensia, you can take it from here.
Thank you so much, Sergio, for that introduction. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank everyone for inviting me to do this and to speak. I hope that I'll have something worthwhile to share. And I'm not going to lie, I'm really, really nervous about this. And I wish that we were face to face because I think having conversations like this are so much better when we do have them face to face. And I would certainly be working the room and walking around as I would be speaking. So let me go ahead and try to share my screen. Let's see. I need to move things down a little bit so I can see everything. I apologize. And when I'm doing this, I don't know about all of you, but I always have to talk at the same time to tell myself, okay, now I'm sharing and so forth. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, okay, great. So here is the title of my talk. I hope that that enticed you a little bit to show up. So let's see, I do want to say that I want you to interrupt me. So, don't feel like you have to put your hand up, just say, Hortensia, I have a question, or Hortensia, I have a question, but please do interrupt me. I'm happy to have you do that. And I prefer that you do that. Don't wait until the end. I want you to just ask questions as we move along. And then let me see, I have to change things a little bit so that I can actually see my slides. Well, that's not going to do. There we go. All right. So I also want to thank Google for all the fun images that I took from the web before I proceed. So let's see. So again, I want to thank the committee for having me be part of the plenary speakers. I was really, really excited to see who the other speakers were. And I loved what they had to say. And one of the things that I like about being last is that I try to integrate what other speakers shared during the workshop. And so I'm going to do that. And before I do that, I actually want to say a little bit about the takeaways that I got from the other plenary speakers, because one of the things that happened after I listened to Aris, I think, is I was like, wow, he is total fire. He was just like reading those comments from Padlet, and he had comments for everything. I thought, wow. And it actually was a little bit different than what I expected, because when I saw his picture, like I look at his eyes and he just seems so, so calm. And when he presented, I was really, really surprised with his fiery personality that emerged. And then Talitha, when she showed that slide of everything that she had been doing and like the arrows from one thing to the other, to the other, to the other, I thought, wow, she is just like total water, where she rides a wave And then the other wave comes on and she gets on. Another wave comes on and she just gets on, and she rides those waves perfectly. And of course, now she's going to be the first African-American woman to serve as president of AWM, the Association for Women of Mathematics. So she has a whole new wave to ride, and I'm excited for her. Lily, when I saw Lily's picture, I thought, wow, she's just like a little breath of fresh air. And I'd never heard Lily speak. I'd never even heard of Lily, although I was familiar with her book, and I just didn't put that together. And her presentation just blew me away. When she shared the Z-score of 88, I really thought I was just going to fall over. And also, it blew me away because, I mean, I was familiar with these statistics. I understood the problems that we have with policing, but the data really hit my brain, and the implications of that really hit my heart. And so my talk is going to be a little bit different. I hope that what I can do is bring you a little bit of earth. And I think some of you know that I do yoga, I practice yoga, and one of our sayings in yoga is root to rise, or ground in order to rise. And I've been practicing yoga for over 20 years, and I can really say that this is really the mantra that gets me through. Like sometimes I have to ground myself in order to rise again. And what does that mean? It means that sometimes I need to let go of my ego and really just come down to earth in order to move forward in the endeavors that I'm attempting to do. And so I'm hoping that this talk will be an opportunity for all of us to really just ground ourselves in the endeavors that we're taking on, and thinking about how that will help us to move forward and to rise up. So one of the things that I do hope will be similar to the other plenaries talks is that that I will be able to touch your brain, and that I'll be able to touch your heart. Because I think that when we merge these two things together, that's when we can begin to make change. All right. And certainly I felt that with the other plenaries talks, is like they were giving me information that touched my head. But once I really resonated with what they were saying, it really quickly got to my heart and made me think about, okay, what are some other things that I can do to bring about change in the world? So what is my goal for this presentation? Again, I want to remind you that I want you to interrupt. I want you to ask questions at any time. But my goal is to reflect on the way that we use some quantifiers, and I want us to do this in a safe space. So I hope that this is a space where we can address some issues regarding quantifiers in a way that will help us to change the way that we speak. And so here's the outline of my talk. And I had this figure because I thought, oh my gosh, this is exactly how I feel. So when I was asked to do this, like I knew immediately that I wanted to talk about these quantifiers and the way that we used them, but I had all of these ideas going into my head, and I had no idea really how to structure my presentation. And so it might still feel a little bit like this scribbled picture on the left-hand side, but I hope that somehow it's a bit organized like the right-hand side picture. And sometimes I think we have to do the scribble part in order to kind of line things up. But what I want us to think about is I want us to think about math and inclusivity. And I want us to start off thinking about math routes, and then we're going to talk about implicit alls. And then I'm going to introduce you to, well, as part of this, I'm going to introduce you to a Franklin. And I want us to think about the Franklins in our lives, and then we're going to think about how we can become Franklins. And then all of us get to have what X, Y, and Z stands for in my presentation, and I will share what it means for me. So before I move forward, are there any questions or comments? And as you know, I can't see the chat. So Sergio, if there's something that comes up in the chat, feel free to share it and interrupt me as you do so. Is that okay?
Will do.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to do, and I'm actually going to get off the presentation while you're putting this in the chat. But in the chat, I want you to write down courses that all students must complete in order to earn an undergraduate or graduate degree in mathematics. And so if you just want to focus on undergraduate, that's fine. If you just want to focus on graduate, that's fine. And then add a sentence as to the reason behind the required course. Okay, so go ahead and do that in the chat. I'm going to stop sharing. I want to come back and see what's written in the chat, and feel free to share out loud also. Let's see. So what am I seeing? Nothing right now. But I bet people are busy writing in the chat. And if you just want to share out loud, yeah, so a proof-based course, intro to proofs, calculus, because that is what we have done for a couple hundred years, if not longer. Okay. Anything else? Real analysis, considered fundamental. Thank you, Ricardo. Anything else? Statistics. Real analysis, because that's rigorous calculus. Yes. Linear algebra, it's in every field. I agree. When I was in grad school, our big theme or thing that we would always say to one another is know your LA, because linear algebra was in everything. Algebra, discrete math, intro to proof writing, and it's ubiquity. I don't know that I know how to pronounce that word, Dana. Okay, so the slide that I have, and right now I forgot to add my reasons. Statistics, to be literate in reading data and interpreting data. Yeah, exactly. So for example, Lily's talk certainly emphasized that. And I think Talitha's talk in some ways alludes to that. Applied math to get some real picture happening around. Yeah, combinatorics, it's a way of thinking. Okay, very good. All right, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go back and share my screen. And I think that my next slide is, how do you feel about this? Oh yeah, I guess it's not quite what I had yet. So, but I did have and if somebody would just verbally share, how do you feel about the curriculum that we've experienced or that you put out there? And I would love it if you would just share out loud. Like, for example, who said calculus? Because we've done that for a few hundred years. How does that make you feel?
As might be a little bit obvious from the way I worded that, I'm not a huge fan of calculus, and it's not an area of mathematics that I have that much interest in, and therefore I didn't especially love that I had to go through so many semesters of different forms of it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Other thoughts?
I think the curriculum or mathematics always was touted as this model of the world, but we live in the world of people, and somehow the mathematics doesn't really connect people up. And so I feel like the content in the coursework was disconnected from the thing that we said we're modeling as people in us.
I like your focus on people. So as a math educator, I'll just share this right now because I do want to share something about myself as we move along. I always say that I went into mathematics education because that is where I get to focus on people. I get to think about how students learn and how I can best teach them so that they learn. And that's really what my research is about. It's about focusing on people, and that's really what led me in that direction. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is I want to share a little clip with you. And so I want to introduce you to Franklin. So Franklin is this turtle right here. And he has several friends. Snail is one of his friends. He has Bear also, who's another good friend. But I met Franklin when my son was a child. And this was one of these shows that he could watch. And I just fell in love with Franklin. So I was just like, oh my gosh, like all the best lessons are from Franklin. It's kind of like when they say, what do you learn in kindergarten? All the important lessons, you learn how to be a friend and so forth. And so I want to show you one of my favorite clips from this show. And I hope that I'll be able to just quickly go to it. And if not, I might have to play around with it so I can share this with you, because this is really, really important to me. But let me give you a little bit about the setting. The setting is that they're going to, I believe it's Bear's birthday party, and Franklin runs into Snail. So let's look at this. Can you begin to see
We're still seeing the slides right now, I think.
Okay, let me see, stop share, and then let me share screen. Here we go. Here we go. Thank you. Okay, can you see this now?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to make sure you can hear this. So that's turned up all the way. All right, here we go.
Whenever I get somewhere, the fun's always over. I left yesterday. Yesterday? Uh-huh. So I wouldn't be late. And now I am going to be late again. There, Snail. Please don't cry. That's better. Now blow.
Okay. Can you all see me now? So the big line from that,
Franklin games.
Wait. This is the problem with it. Okay, can you see me still? Yeah, okay. I still get emotional when I hear that. And when I went and dug that up, I still got emotional, but it kind of became a theme with parenting when Miguel was upset about something, when he couldn't do something. It was like, I left yesterday, Mom. That was kind of his thing of like, I'm frustrated, or I've been trying this for so hard, for so long, and I don't know, I need help. It was kind of like his thing of, I need help. And still to this day, he and I sometimes, like, I'll get frustrated with something. I'm like, I just feel like I left yesterday. And so I want to share that I have lots of experiences with where I feel like I left yesterday. So for example, I didn't attend a prestigious university. I started at a community college. I started with college algebra. I don't have a famous advisor. Again, I didn't graduate from a famous college, but still I'm here. I'm here at the party. You're all here at the party. And so one of the things that I want us to think about is, how did we get to the party if we left yesterday? You know, I didn't have support at home. My parents have a third grade education. And yet we're here at the party. Okay. Comments so far? Maybe reactions to Franklin. Any thoughts right now? I want, it's a space for all of us to be vulnerable, and that's why I'm talking about it's a safe space. So if anyone wants to share anything, I encourage you to be brave. That was one of Eris's messages, I think, be brave. And so if you want to be brave, I ask you to be brave. If you feel like you can be brave, and feel free, just not in the chat, but verbally to share. Okay, let's see. I'm sad that not to cry. I think it's okay. I agree. Yeah, this is something that we'll talk about. Okay, so let me move on and continue sharing my screen. All right, so there was Franklin. We got to know Franklin now. And I'll come back to Franklin, I promise. This is part of my talk where I feel like it's all kind of scattered because there's lots of things that I want to share, but I want to come back to what is the mathematics that we are all expected to take. So one of the questions that researchers have tried to investigate is, why do students from historically underrepresented groups tend to avoid STEM? And there's different reasons for this, and certainly Eris in some implicit ways alluded to some of these, but there's these notions of stereotype threat, there's self-affirmation theory, there's race-based rejection sensitivity, there's communal goal affirmation theory, there's expectancy value theory, and there's critical race theory. And the one that I want to spend just a little bit of time on is this communal goal affirmation theory. And this theory kind of separates individualistic from communal goals. So many of us probably know that educational environments emphasize individualistic goals, so personal gain, prestige, agency, things that we might talk about in terms of power, which Eris alluded to in his talk. And so a lot of these agencies tend to focus on that. It's like, hey, the more educated you are, or if you pursue a career in STEM, you will gain power. But many students from underrepresented groups are really not that interested in the power part. They are more interested in, how can I help my community? How can I help others? And those students tend to pursue and persist toward goals that match their values. And some of these students are much more, have much more motivation if they get to share tasks and where they feel a sense of belonging. And I think workshops like this, seminars like this, are a great way for us to begin to build such community. It's like, yeah, you're not going to be alone, which Talitha alluded to also in her talk when she pointed to Edre Goins' article where he said, like, I felt like I was the only one. Okay. This past summer, I was invited to partake in a workshop organized by Pamela Harris and others, which was the Latin Research Mathematics community. And I was floored. There were 60 of us Hispanics, Latinos, Latinas, and I didn't know that there were that many of us. I grew up in a time where it was me in my math classes. And a lot of times I was the only woman also. So this idea of community is very important. And Estrada et al. Quote that among historically underrepresented students, there's growing evidence that communal goals are important for retention and departure in terms of the STEM fields. Native American students, for example, value connection, caring for others, and doing work that helps their community. And that when students experience goal congruence, they may experience connection, acceptance, and inclusion of their full identity. And that full identity is like, I'm Hispanic, I'm African American, I'm gay, I'm trans, whatever it is that is our identity. And so what I want to ask is, do these curriculums that we currently have for our students really address to communal goals? And so how might we design some mathematics courses or programs for those students that are interested in communal goals? And I was really excited about Talitha's talk, and she said it so much better than I'm going to, because I'm not a data scientist, but really data science, I think, is a way to address this. And so hopefully you all got to attend Talitha's talk. And so I'm just going to share what it is that we're doing at Colorado State. So Colorado State just recently, in the past 5 years, I think, created a data science program. So in terms of existence of data science, our program is quite mature. It's a marriage between computer science, economics, mathematics, neuroscience, and statistics, okay? And so you might be asking, wow, those sound like heavy math routes. So Hortensia, I don't know what you're going to say that's going to be different in terms of programs that are accessible to our communities. And what CSU has done is, because this program very much sounds calculus based, is that they created 2 different routes. So one route is a calculus-based route to data science, and the other one is a linear algebra route to data science. And I do want to emphasize that the linear algebra route is a minor in data science. And I don't want to say the word, it's only a minor. I think we tend to use that word only a bit too much, as though it's not as important, it's not as valuable. Like, I have a lot of students who'll come into my office and say, I only want to get a master's. I'm like, no, you're not going to say, I only want to get a master's in mathematics. How many people have masters in mathematics? You simply need to say that I want to get a master's in mathematics, period. Okay, so I really want us to work on not devaluing the things that we have really accomplished. So in any case, CSU has created a minor towards data science where the emphasis begins with linear algebra. There is no calculus involved in this. And this is kind of the outline of the data science minor. So there's data structures, data wrangling, optimization, some data analysis, and linear algebra for the data sciences. And one of the things, and then there's these other electives right here, which you can see. But one of the things that we're going to be doing, and I feel really fortunate that I was invited to do this, is we're actually going to have a precursor to this linear algebra course, because this really does require some understanding before this regarding linear independence, span, and so forth, subspaces. And it's very difficult, I think, for students to just come in without any mathematics background and understand this. So I'm going to be creating a 2-credit course where students will get a good understanding of these 4 ideas in R3. We're not going to look at any other space except for R3. And then that way they can extrapolate those ideas to RN in this 3-credit course. Are there any questions or comments at this point in time? Anything, Sergio, that I should know about that's in the chat?
A couple of these programs sounds fascinating. And thank you for a statement that you made before, but it seems everything, like there is no questions per se.
Okay, thank you. All right, so that is one route that we could think about in terms of making mathematics accessible to all. So I think a lot of times when we think that math for all, I think that we have this implicit message that, and the mathematics has to look the same for all, that all the math has to be the same. So one of the things that I ask as you move forward in your careers is to continue to think about that mathematics for all doesn't mean that math has to be the same for all. And how can we massage the curriculum to make it accessible? And I think, for example, the course that Lily talked about is something that, you know, it's an intro to stats course. I think that when we teach intro to stats courses and we bring in real data from the community, I think that can make a big impact on our students. All right, so let me move to the next thing. So in the chat again, and I'll stop sharing because I would like to see it. I'd like for you to write down sentences or things that you have heard that have had an implicit all. So maybe they didn't use the word all, but there's an implicit all in the sentence. And I'll stop sharing so I can see some of these. And if you don't mind, I'm going to share one that came to mind when I started thinking about putting this talk together. And it's one that I found very, very hurtful. And it was a statement that a president of the United States made about Hispanics, about Mexicans. I think he even used the word Mexicans. But that Mexicans are rapists, drug dealers. There was another adjective in there. That's an implicit all. That's what people hear is all. And I know that that doesn't have anything to do with mathematics, but it has a way of how we perceive then Mexicans, all Mexicans, because that was the implication that it's all.
We have 3 of them, actually 4 right now. Just want to read them. One of them is, it is easily seen.
Yes, thank you.
Another one is mathematicians, implicitly all, love spending all their free time on math and never struggle with basic math.
Thank you. Thank you.
Also, I think about when mathematicians use the word obvious in talks, implying that something is obvious for all. The word they use trivial, should be trivial for all. Proof by intimidation.
Yes.
Math is apolitical. I agree a lot with that one.
Yes.
I'll put it in layman's terms. I don't actually know what that means. How do you not know this? And then all Africans are poor. I mean, not without the all is implicit, but like Africans are poor. And mathematicians are good at mental arithmetic.
Yeah. So think about all the things that some of us say sometimes and what that might do to the psyche of a student hearing these things, whether it's good or bad. It's like, oh, I'm not good at mental math, so there's no way I'll ever be a mathematician because all mathematicians are good at mental math, okay? Or this is easily seen. That's like, everyone will easily see this. Well, I don't easily see it, so I guess that means I'm not going to be good at math, okay? So there's lots of things that some of us say sometimes that really can be hurtful and imply to others that therefore there's no way they can be a mathematician, okay? And so that's why I want us to think about the quantifiers that we use, because we certainly make a big deal about them in our mathematics classes. But then we tend to forget about how we might be using them in a way that can be hurtful or dissuade others, some folks, from coming into mathematics. Okay, let me go back to sharing my screen. And then just how does that make you feel? I think that that's an important component in terms of us trying to change things for ourselves and for others. And that's how come at the beginning of my talk, I talked about how do we impact the brain? How do we inform the brain? And then how does that connect to our heart? Because I think it's when we touch somebody's heart and somebody's soul, that's when we can begin to transform. And so you can think about just the different ways that some of these comments have made you feel and how they might, and even if it's not for you, how might they make others feel? Okay. So the next thing that I want, or the message is that the implicit all can be hurtful, okay? Or it can push others away from mathematics, which is not what we want to do. We want to embrace them into the STEM field, or even if it's not explicitly mathematics, but we want them to succeed. So the next thing that I have is I want us in the chat to write down names of those who have supported you along the way on any path. It can be on your math career path. It can be on your, if you're, you know, a skier, your skiing path. For me, it's yoga. I certainly have my teachers who have supported me along that way, but that has led to transforming who I am as a person also. And so in the chat, I want you to write down those who have supported you, and are they the same or are they different from you? So for example, we saw in the video how Franklin was able to support Snail. They don't look anything alike, and yet Franklin helped Snail. So in the chat, if you'll just share those who have supported you along the path, and just how did that make you feel? And if you want to share out loud, I'd love to hear that. Especially if you have a personal story of someone who's helped you along the way who doesn't look anything like you. Isabel, 100%, Patty, my elementary school teachers from Selby, yes. Oh, I like this one, Carrie, your spouse. Robin, Selby also. Yeah, so for me, I can honestly say that, I think most of you probably already know my story, but you know, I was, well, maybe let me go back to my slide. Because maybe I'm assuming that you know, and maybe you don't know. But as you think about these people who have impacted you, think about how you feel. For me, the picture that always comes up is the grateful picture. I'm really, really grateful. And that's huge in my life, is gratitude. And so think about the people who have helped you along the way. And so that brings me to kind of my story. So this is where I want to share a little bit about myself. So maybe you know, and maybe you don't know, but this is where I was born. This is the house where I was born. My parents have a 3rd grade education. And we moved to the United States when I was 1. And we moved to Western Nebraska. And it's a community of it's a farming community, population less than 1,000. And most of the Hispanics who live there are actually related to me. So a big cluster of my family migrated to that area. And so mostly this community is white farmers. That's mostly who is there. And I was really blessed that we were taken care of. by this white community who really embraced us. And for me in particular, it's my 5th grade teacher, a white woman who asked me to stay in during recess, which I thought was like for an eternity. And I couldn't figure out why I had to stay in during recess. I was scared that I had done something to offend her. I was more scared that she would call my parents and tell them that I was staying in during recess because I knew I would get in big trouble. But in any case, one day she said, okay, you don't have to come in during recess anymore because starting next week, you're going to be in the high group. So that's what she had been doing. She kept me in during recess to do extra work so I could get caught up, so I could be in the high group. Those are the kind of people who have taken care of me and supported me. And of course, I'll be honest, I cried and I said, I don't want to be in the high group because for me being in the high group, I felt like that wasn't the type of people I was used to associating with. I thought they were the rich people because I associated rich with being in band, and everybody in the high group was in band and we couldn't afford band. But really, she walked me to the classroom and hugged me and said, everything's going to be okay. And so for me, the people who have helped me along the way have been mostly older white men in terms of my profession. And I just want us to pause there for a bit. So the people who have mostly helped me have been mostly older white men. I never had a female math instructor until I was in grad school, I think. Yes, until I was in grad school. And she was Hispanic and she pronounced my name correctly, and I was just amazed. So I want to emphasize this because things that I routinely hear are old white men make all the decisions. Old white men get all the prizes, raises, promotions. Old white men think we're trying to take something away from them. These phrases have the implicit all. And I was recently at a meeting where this sentence came up, something about old white men. And I just looked around the room because there were some older white men in the room. And I felt maybe empathy for them, but I felt really, really bad that these were the sentences that we were saying in that meeting. And so I guess one of the things that I really want us to think about is, what are the phrases that we are using that can be hurtful? What are these implicit things that we use in sentences that we convey that might be hurtful to some people who have actually helped us along the way? Are there some white men who make all the decisions? Yes, there are. Are there some older white men who tend to get all the prizes? Yes. Are there some older white men who think we're trying to take something away from them? Yes, and it's not just men. I mean, I think that there are some older white women who also think we might be trying to take something away from them. But it's some, it's not all. And for me personally, I can say that I have been the snail who has stood on the shoulders of some older white men, that they have elevated me somehow and that they have helped me. And it wasn't really until recently, and I will say this Latin research community, where I feel like, oh, I'm being elevated by people from my own community, because before that, there weren't any people like me. Okay. And one of the things that I thought about, and I tried to find a picture, but I couldn't find one that I really liked. is when I traveled to Europe, one of the things that I found really exciting as we toured around is when we would do these bus tours and they would showcase these buildings and they would say, oh, it used to be the building for whatever. And then they just built on top of it and made it this building, which is very unlike the way that we do things in the United States. In the United States, it seems like if we want to build a new building, it's like, let's tear down the old one first and let's start from scratch. And I think that we could do better if we do stand on the shoulders of these giants who are already established. But that, of course, means not but, and, because but negates the sentence I just said, the phrase I just said. And those giants allow us to stand on their shoulders. And so the question is, how do we do that? How do we stand on shoulders of others? How do we allow others to stand on our shoulders? And I think Ari's kind of alluded to I don't know why I keep wanting to pronounce his name like he's Hispanic. I apologize to Aries. But Aries alluded to this yesterday when he's like, we need to find creative ways to create spaces for those of us from underrepresented groups. And those creative ways, I think, really mean attending to our heart, listening to our head, and coming together. Like right before my session, we played this really fun game. I loved it and I already forgot it. But we traveled to these different places and we were supposed to try to guess where we were. And as a whole community, we did pretty good. But that's because we all had diverse backgrounds. We had all different experiences. And those different experiences allowed us to do really, really good on this game. If I'd been playing the game by myself, the only one I would have got close was that Nebraska one. And that's how we can do better in our field, in our world, in our communities, is by bringing in diverse groups, people with diverse ideas. And that's how we do better. That's how we do better at the game. So how do you feel right now? Kind of just check in with the group. How are you feeling? Are you in your head or are you in your heart? Are you in your head or in your heart? Oh, I like that, Dwight. Thank you. I'm going to read it out loud. I think many of the old white people that have helped me have also centered my personhood, and I didn't feel like I was one step away from being thrown off their shoulders. They also lived out that we needed to learn from each other. Yes, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Let's see, there's something, I heard some owls saying things like, young, poor white men that have it tough now. Finally have a woman mentor. Yeah, it's so nice, I think, when we actually have somebody who looks like us and has had similar experiences who can mentor us. I do want to value and acknowledge the importance of that. I hear that from my students. This is like, I think my second year. I feel like been forever because COVID has really shifted things around in my head. But I'm the first faculty member in the math department from an underrepresented group. And I've had several of the Hispanic students come and say, oh my gosh, it's so nice, you get us, you understand, and it's so nice to have somebody who we can talk to. And so I recognize that those things are very, very important. So I don't want to diminish that. What I do want to say is, like, we're going to be mentors for others, students who look like us, and let's also be mentors for those who don't look like us. okay, who have different experiences. So I'm going to have you reflect again in the chat. I want to make sure I can actually see what I wrote. So I'd like for you in the chat to write ways in which you have supported others on their path. Because I think a lot of times we think about, oh, people have helped me, but we don't stop to acknowledge what it is that we are doing for others. And I think it's really, really important that we recognize that, hey, I am making a difference in people's lives. And so I'd like to hear a little bit about how you are being a Franklin for others. And I think anyone who has helped to organize this workshop should write down, I helped to organize this workshop. Because that is a huge, huge way in which you can be a Franklin, in which you are a Franklin. Let's see. Writing, oh, let's see, Dwight. This conversation is important. I don't want to lose sight of the invisible and visible help of those, invisible and visible. Sorry, just the chat is moving, which is great. Invisible and visible help of those invisible to their peers except for exploitation or when they submit to the will of their mainstream system. Yes, yes, I agree with that. Writing recommendations for students, I think that's great. I just had a conversation with my associate dean the other day because there's hopes of someday Colorado State becoming an HSI. And he asked, you know, what are some ways in which we can help the students besides cost? And I said, there's lots of ways that don't cost anything. Know the students' names. Say hello to them when you see them out on campus. Take time to chat with them. I think that's huge for students from underrepresented groups. It's like, oh, somebody knows me, somebody noticed me. And I think he was flabbergasted that those were the suggestions that I was giving. But I think sometimes we think it has to be something huge, and sometimes it's the smallest little things that make a difference. Okay, I appreciate all the comments in the chat of those acknowledging that you're taking steps to make a difference for others. I think that's great. I'm going to share my screen again. Ricardo, there's also an implicit all in the sentence, people that look like me will identify with me. Ooh, thank you, Ricardo. I want to share a story because of that comment. When I was in college, I had some friends and they're like, oh, we want you to meet so-and-so. So I went to a school that I don't know that there were very many other Hispanics. I certainly didn't know any. And I guess I wasn't really concerned about it, to tell you the truth. But I was introduced to a girl who was also Hispanic, and people thought we were just going to hit it off because she was also Hispanic. And I thought, that is the weirdest thing. I mean, do people introduce two white people because they're going to like one another? It made no sense to me whatsoever. And actually, we had very little in common. So I think we want to be careful, and exactly as Ricardo pointed out. Let's see. So here are my X, Y, and Z. I think that for every group of particular people, community, culture, there exists some of those people who will support Math for All. And so I just want us to be careful about insinuating that in some particular culture, everybody from that culture does not support math. And those are the X, Y, and Z's for me, but you might have something different. And I just want to leave you with this third message, that we get to choose to be that someone from our community who does support math for all. And that we get to be the Franklins if we so choose. That's all I have.